Central High School YouTube channel, so that other families who are not able to be here tonight can access that, can get their questions answered and the support that they need. So I say that because by you being here with me and listening in and being a part of this conversation, you're acknowledging that you're being recorded. And I'll try to remind that all of us of that over the course of the conversation, just so that if we have people who join late, that they know that we'll be recorded as well. So thank you for that too. I'd appreciate it if you could mute your microphone. What often happens in these conversations is someone has a wonderful dog, like I see that, Cheryl, you have a great dog, yes. And sometimes dogs or animals, or I don't know, our sons and daughters can be loud. With that in mind, if you can mute your microphone. Two, if you notice in the chat, you'll notice something called a back channel. And that is a shared Google Doc that all of you can access as soon as you click on that button, not link, excuse me. And what that's going to be is that is a technique that our teachers use here at Portage Central High School, and I'm sure in a lot of different places, where you can post your questions. And Tama's going to be monitoring those questions to share that with all of us, so that we can answer every question that you have on your mind tonight. And you can also see the questions that were maybe already asked, or if you want to ask any clarifying questions. That's particularly important because it'll help us organize the conversation, but it's also important because we have something called our frequently asked questions. Parents have submitted wonderful, wonderful questions to us that we've been working very hard to respond to over the last 2 to 3 weeks. I sent you a link about that before this meeting as well as yesterday. And not only is that frequently asked question a really good way for us to communicate, it's actually also incredibly helpful because of you as moms and dads and our kids who have submitted questions. That's actually guided the work that we need to do. Sometimes we didn't know what we needed to think about until people asked us questions for us to think about. So I'm really grateful, so that any of the questions we have here tonight, if we don't have those in the frequently asked questions, we'll work to add those. And particularly if we have questions tonight that we can't answer, and that's going to happen, we're also going to record that in the back channel and make sure that we take our responses and add that to the frequently asked questions. So I'd encourage you to check in on that frequently asked questions again in the days ahead to make sure that you feel like all your questions are answered. That has been a really, really valuable tool, and we're grateful for all the feedback that's given us. So for example, last night we had our first parent informational meeting, and we had that right outside, right out by our community garden. And while we had that, we had 3 wonderful questions that I didn't have a clue about, not a clue. And so we were already working today, making the phone calls and following up to get those answers so we can add those to our frequently asked questions. So again, hopefully we can answer most of your questions, but I'm sure we won't be able to answer all of them. And I want to make sure that we record those ones we don't know so that we can get you the questions and the answers you need. So that is the long preamble for starting. And thank you for your patience with my first year teacher anxieties. It's been a long, long time since I've had first year anxieties, so I appreciate that a lot. And that's what I'd like to do is start. Tama's organizing the back channel. She's going to look at your questions that you submit. She's going to ask that question of all of us, and then we'll have that conversation that Tama will help me with, and then we'll continue on with throughout the course of the evening. So do you have a first question up there, Tama, yet?
I don't, but I can ask you a question that I perceive is on the minds of many of our parents, just based on myself being a parent in Portage Public Schools. What is the first day of school actually going to look like? Are students going to be in virtual classes on August 31st, or are they coming in to get their textbooks? What does August 31st look like?
Yes, our first day of school, I'm glad Tama asked that, because it is going to be unlike any first day at school at Portage Central High School in our 100-year career. So it is going to be very, very different. One thing is, hopefully you've already received a mailing, small card in the mail. And we also got that information out through our weekly and sometimes twice a week email addresses. All of our kids were inviting into the building, wearing masks, of course, for about 20-minute increments. On the back of that mailing, you should be able to see letters for your last name and what time we're asking our sons and daughters to come in the building, because we need to get them stuff, gear, school supplies, textbooks, art supplies, a host of things. That's why we're inviting all of them to come into the building, to be able to move very quickly, very briskly through the building, make eye contact and smile with their eyes with their teachers, get the things that they need that we'll check out. And also, many of our kids haven't got a chance to return their things from last school year. So we'll have an opportunity for them to do that as well. So if you do not have that mailing yet, or if you have not seen that email that explains that, I would appreciate if you shoot me an email sometime here in the next few hours or sometime tomorrow, just at ealbertus@portageps.org. I'll take that invitation that you didn't get. I'll send it right out to you so that you can get information so that you know what all of our sons and daughters are going to be doing. Keeping in mind, too, though, that there are some of us who might not be able to come on Monday. For example, I talked to a wonderful mom yesterday whose daughter has diabetes, and that's a risk factor for everything we're talking here. That's okay, too. You let us know that. We'll put you on the list. Once Monday is through, we'll see how many people need those alternative arrangements, and I'll reach out to you again to fill you in about what we're going to do to make sure all of our sons and daughters have the school supplies that they need to have a successful year here at Portage Central High School, despite all the strangeness that we are all working through right now. Thanks a lot for asking that, Tama.
Thanks, Eric. We actually have our first question. It's about EFE and EFA. It says our fact page doesn't yet have the answer to whether EFE and EFAs are actually going to be running. Do we know if EFE and EFAs are going to be offered? And if so, are they going to be on site at those locations like Loy Norix? And will they accommodate travel time? That's the first part of the question. That was actually 2 questions, but I know there's a third part too. So after you answer that, then I'll ask the next part.
Perfect. I'll just keep my mouth shut until you actually finish. Sorry about that, Tama. Yes, EFE and EFA is a really, I think Tama's and my jobs can be hard sometimes. Not harder than Cam Buck and Brian Zocker. Cam is one of our EFE administrators for the entire Kalamazoo County. Brian Zocker is a great friend and that EFA director as well. And every school in Kalamazoo County is doing what we're doing here and what virtual education is going to look like a little bit differently. And so EFE and EFA are trying to work with all the different schools because as you pointed out, as Tama pointed out, or the writer of that question pointed out, every school is a little bit different. And most of those EFE and EFA classes are housed in high schools around Kalamazoo County. So actually, Brian Zocker and Cam just reached out to us last night with a tentative plan that we shared with our counselors. And now EFE and EFA are going to start reaching out to our EFE and EFA students here in the rest of this week. What that might mean is that EFE and EFA in certain programs might be starting later than the first day of school. In fact, I would almost bank on it because there is so much logistics that they're having to work through, not just with those particular classes and whether they're online or not online, or whether they're hybrid, where they're somewhat online and somewhat in person, but also the transportation logistics between all the different high schools. So right now, I can say it looks like that EFE and EFA classes will happen, which makes me really happy because those are some wonderful programs. And it looks like it will be happening at those individual schools. And each program will probably look a little different than the other. And I would almost absolutely bet that they won't start on the very first day of school. So just people ask your son or daughter to keep watching out for his or her email address. And because you should be getting more information from EFE and EFA soon. So yeah, that has been a really complicated part of all of our high school kids' education because we have a lot of our kids who do EFE and EFA. So thanks a lot for asking that question.
All right, the next part of that question is about grading and evaluations for EFE and EFA. How does that actually happen?
Wow, that is something that we talked about at the beginning of this whole conversation, to write down questions that I don't have answers to. That is a question that we need to write down and find answers to because I have no idea. And I say that because even in the best of circumstances on a normal school year, I don't know what each of those EFE and EFA programs do. So for example, many of our EFA programs are housed at the KVCC's Arcadia Commons downtown campus. So that's a KVCC class, a very different set of expectations in terms of grading and everything else than an EFE class, for example, that might be housed here at Portage Northern or Loy Norix. So I say all of that is that when you get that email about what's happening with EFE and EFA, I would encourage your sons and daughters to reach out to that teacher to find out what they're doing with their specific program so that you know what that looks like and feels like, so that you can make the right decisions for you as a family about whether to continue with that EFE and EFA program. And if you do, that's wonderful, because they are wonderful programs, or whether doing something different is the right thing for you to do, given all the circumstances that we all as families are working through. So yes, that is a good and complicated question that I don't have a solid answer for. So I apologize for that.
All right, we've got a couple more questions about August 31st. One of them, and actually, if you don't mind, Eric, I'll just answer them because they're quick. One of them is on Monday, will the students get their schedule and then go to each room to pick up books, even if they are virtual? And the answer to that question is yes. There are not going to be any virtual classes on August 31st, that first half day of school. Instead, we're inviting all of our students, whether they are virtual or they've selected virtual with in-building support, to come on site to pick up their textbooks and, like Eric said, wear their mask, smile at their teachers, pick up their syllabus, and then leave the building. And for those of you who joined us a little bit later, we want to be clear that we are limiting the number of students who are coming into our building. We're going to require masks. We will be enforcing social distancing. And we have a fairly complex check-in, check-out system so that we know exactly how many students are in the building and for how long those students have been in the building. So that is one of the ways that we're monitoring that. And again, if you've entered this meeting late, if you need to make any kind of alternate arrangements because you have a situation where your son or daughter cannot come into the building, please reach out to us and we will put you on the list for those who are requiring those alternative accommodations. Another question about August 31st. What if my child has to ride their bike to the school? Is it okay that he'll be there by himself to get his supplies? The answer to that is yes. He would have to wait outside of the building, just like any other student who is coming in. They'll wait in a queue that is socially distanced, very similar to what we did at graduation, if you were able to view that on our YouTube channel. That's how they're going to be queuing up outside of our building. And then he can wait there, and he can, when he leaves, he would ride home on his bike, and that's how that would work. We've got some more questions, Eric, though.
Could I add one thing to that, Tim, if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. One of the things that we think is really that we value is that when our sons and daughters come on that Monday, that they pick up their textbooks. I think most of us as parents know that many of our textbooks are available online, and that's good. It's a wonderful resource that our sons and daughters can use. And we also, I think many of us have a concern about how much screen time our kids can be using. And so having those textbooks to be able to also use as a resource and to get a break from our screens is something that we also value. So yes, there's a lot of things we're hoping to satisfy on Monday. And I think we have a really good system in place to make sure our kids are happy and that we connect with them and we keep moving them along so that we make sure that there aren't too many people in the building at one time. You want to shoot the next question, Tama?
All right, another question that we have, sorry, I got to get out of full screen mode here, is regarding class recordings. Will classes be recorded so that students can go back and review the lessons that are taught if they have to miss a class or a day due to unforeseen circumstances? Will they be able to access a recording of their class? And a separate but related question, when students are in those virtual classes, must they have their video on at all times?
Yeah, these are really wonderful questions that we've been wrestling with and getting a lot of advice from schools attorneys in the state of Michigan, because the state of Michigan has some particular quirks that involve legal quirks that deal with the questions we're talking about. But let me answer the question as directly as I can. No, not all lessons will be recorded. Many of them will be, and they will be a really helpful resource for our kids. And there are a lot of resources that we're going to be providing to our kids who are absent, because absences are going to happen very appropriately, either just normal sicknesses or everything else that our kids are dealing with today. And the main thing we want to emphasize is we want our kids connecting with our colleagues just like they always would when they're absent. And that might be talking with them and setting up a time to visit, like before school or after school, to make sure they're caught up. That might be sometimes watching a recorded discussion or a classroom presentation, or it might be also just having a chance to that all of our teachers on their Google Classrooms have their presentations posted there. So it's just a question of looking through the information that the teachers discussed that particular day. So there will be a lot of different approaches that our sons and daughters will be able to access on days that they're absent. And the most important resource is that relationship between teachers and students to make sure the two of them are talking so they both know and getting what they need during those times when we have to be away from each other. So I think that was the first part of the question, but I think I've already forgotten the second part of the question, Tama, forgive me.
The second part of the question is related to whether or not students have to have their cameras on.
Yes, actually the answer is no. There's, to be clear, there's real value for us as teachers having the video cameras on. That is to say, that's one of the ways that we'll be able to stay connected with our kids, be able to know whether our kids are engaged with us, that just by using all of those nonverbal cues that you do. Having said that, there's also lots of really good reasons as to why students might not have their cameras on. That have to do with their own family situation, their own living situation, everything that's very specific to their own life that's going on around us. So what we want to emphasize is whenever possible, whenever appropriate, we like having the video cameras on so that we can connect with our kids and they can see us and we can see them. But if at any point for either you as a mom or a dad or for our sons and daughters, it's appropriate to not have the camera on, we trust you. Obviously, that's your decision about what you think is best. And we want to make sure you have that conversation with your son or daughter so that you can make that decision thoughtfully and do what's right by you for a family. So that is a wonderful question and one we've struggled with. And that's where we landed right now. So thanks for that.
All right, we have a couple more questions about August 31st. Let me get down here. If your child is signed up for in-school or in-building support on August 31st, the half day, what does their day look like? Eric, do you want to take that one or you want me to take that one?
You can do that. Actually, I say that because Tama's done really so much of the work as far as organizing. And actually, she's taking a page from Disney World to keep kids moving throughout here. She's a big fan of Disney World. So yes. So yeah, can you fill them in?
Yes. All right. So if you are relying on bus transportation and you had planned to send your student to school on the half day, August 31st, first of all, it's important for you to know that there are not going to be any virtual classes that day. The only thing that we're doing that day is distributing textbooks. That said, if your student is a bus rider, they will come into the building and we will put them in one of our in-building support locations where they will be supervised by one of our staff members. And then when it's their turn, when it's their letter, the last name, when it's their time to go get their textbooks, they would be moved through our line at that time. And then when they're finished, they would go back to that in-building support location in another zone of our building until it's time for them to get back on the bus to head home. That said, if you are signed up for August 31st and you thought that there were going to be online classes that day and you don't need them to go into school, you're welcome to keep them home. There's not going to be attendance taken on that day other than the students coming in to get their textbooks so that we know who's picked up their textbooks and who has not picked up their textbooks. So hopefully that answers your question about those students who have signed up for in-building support. Another question that we have regarding the 31st, what's going on for incoming freshmen who are not familiar with the facility? I'm really, really happy that our Link Crew, which is the organization that ran our freshman orientation on Monday, they are going to have Link leaders here. Those are our mentors for our freshmen. And they have the familiar Link Crew shirt. Outside of our building, we have a separate station for our freshmen so that they know where they're going. The people who are running that station are going to be extremely helpful to those students. They'll show them on a map where to go and help to make those freshmen and new students who are new to Portage Central and to PPS feel more comfortable about our facility. So that's how we're going to be managing our incoming freshmen and helping them make a healthy transition to us. A couple other questions, Eric, that I think that you can answer regarding the 31st and health screenings. One of them is, will the students be screened prior to entering the building on Monday, the 31st? So specifically, temperature check, symptoms check, that type of a thing.
Yeah, great question. And the interesting question is actually no. Let me explain that a little bit. So we have had truly hundreds of our students here on campus for athletic workouts, for club meetings, for garden club out here, a whole number of things. And when students are involved in extracurricular activities, it is right and appropriate for us to, number one, that we have a system set up where they do a check on a Google document about how they're feeling and any symptoms they have, but also it allows us to take their temperatures. In the state of Michigan, our school code is actually a part of part of the Michigan Constitution. And one of the things we've learned, and all of the things we learned over the last few weeks, it is inappropriate for us, in fact, illegal under our Michigan Constitution, for us to acquire medical information like temperatures from our kids for the school day. Because of the school day, our students have a right to being in school. They do. They don't have a right to be in the garden club or our football team. So that's why that distinction is there. And it's a rather weird distinction, but one we're still beholding to, even these strange circumstances that we're working through right now. Where that becomes relevant is I had a chance to email you, and I'm actually going to send another one on Thursday, what we're asking for you as a district for our moms and dads. That is to say, it's a 2-page form for you to touch base with your son and daughter every day before they come into Portage Central High School or any of our district schools, to walk you through as a mom or dad, what are the things to look for? What are the symptoms? You taking the temperatures to make sure your son or daughter is safe and healthy, and also safe and healthy for anyone else he or she may come into contact with while he or she is here at school. So really that's where that difference lies. And we're going to be really relying on you as moms and dads to be watchful of this. And again, I'll be sending that out so you'll know exactly what that looks like and feels like, so that you can have those conversations with your son and daughter to make sure that they have what they need and they feel confident about coming into school, and any of the times where they need in-building support. So great question. I'm glad someone asked that.
Another question related to safety and just logistics is, what percentage of our student population signed up for in-building support? And then another question that's related is, if I signed up for in-building support, but I only need it occasionally, is that okay?
Yes, that is actually exactly what we work on. So far the district asked you as moms and dads, how many of you think that at some point during the school year, that is to say during the time we're in phase 4, during this online education, how many of you as moms and dads would like your sons or daughters to access in-building support at some point during this experience? Right now, about 260, 270 of our moms and dads, of our families, have said, yes, we would like to have this resource at some point. And it's our goal to make sure that we give our sons and daughters the support they need when they need it and not when they don't need it. So what does that mean? And what that means is every Thursday, we're going to be asking you as moms and dads to go into a website. We have it actually posted on our district's website, and we actually sent that out in a link on Tuesday in that email that you received. You would click on that link, you'd look at the week ahead, and you would decide for any of our students whether you want your son or daughter to come to school for in-building support for 4 days, or maybe just 1 or 2 days. Totally your decision. You'd be making that decision on a week-to-week basis. We ask that you give us that feedback before you go to sleep on Thursday, because first thing when we wake up on Friday morning, we'll be working on a plan to make sure we have socially distanced and cohorted rooms so that our kids are safe while they're here and so they get the support that they need. But while we talk about that, I just want to be clear about what support means in building support. What it doesn't mean is working with a teacher. That's something that we cannot provide in building support. What it does mean is we can provide them a good internet access, number one. For many of our kids, that's really what they need, is a good internet where they can use it consistently and access all their classes. Another thing that we can do is we can give them a room where they can be focused. That is to say, one of our rooms along the Mustang Way, where they're going to be there with about 15 to 18 other students, again, socially distanced, about 6 feet apart from each other. And each of those rooms will be monitored by a support colleague. Keep in mind, that's not a teacher. It is a wonderful human being like Coach Mick Enders, or Coach Nick Hostler, or Nate Turner, or Carol Cutler, or Ryan Hammett, all wonderful people who greatly appreciate and like our high school kids, and who are there as support to be that encouraging voice to be able to say, hey, you haven't done any work here for the last 20 minutes. Let's get back focused on what you need to do for math. So really supportive, good human beings, but they are not teachers. They won't be able to provide that one-on-one academic support for all the different classes. In that context, when our sons or daughters need that academic support, those monitors, their responsibility, what they're going to be doing is encouraging those conversations between kids and teachers. That is to say, looking and realizing that maybe Donovan in class is struggling with his math. So how do we find a way for Donovan to hook up with Martha Keeler, his math teacher, either before school or after school, or maybe during her seminar, through a Google Meet, so they can talk through the things that they're struggling with to get right back on track with what they need to have for their class. So in building support, I'm grateful that we can offer it, especially, like I said, for that internet access, especially for a place for a student to have a quiet space to get their work done. I just want to be honest and upfront about it. It's not like being Portage Central. It's not what we normally can provide our kids with our teachers. So it will definitely have a different feeling than it would have in a normal context. So thanks for asking that question.
A related question is, will the support staff person that's monitoring the room that my child is assigned to, will that be the same staff support person every time they come, or will they be moved around?
It's a great question. As
Different
much
weeks?
as we can, as much as we can, we will have that person, your sons and daughters, work with that same monitor. But there will be circumstances where we won't be able to provide that. So, for example, like I said, because we as moms and dads will be able to choose which days to come in, and we are responsible for keeping them socially distant, that is to say, at least 6 feet apart, we will, based on any given day, have some students who are there more on one day and fewer on another day. And so as a result, our plans will have to change on a day-to-day basis. So it is our commitment to work as hard as we can to keep kids cohorted in rooms with the same teacher, with the same support staff. But I know also that there will be days that we won't be able to do that just because of the dynamics of that particular day and how many students we're going to be serving on that particular day. So that's just a long way of saying is we will do our absolute best.
All right, we've got so many great questions, and we're doing the best that we can to monitor those and keep them organized. So I apologize if you've entered your question in there earlier. I'm trying to categorize them in my head so that they kind of get clumped together. So we've got some more August 31st questions, and because that's the first day, I'm prioritizing those. So, yep. How long will the August 31st process take per student? In other words, should transportation just wait in the parking lot? And the answer is it will take, if everything goes the way that we plan, it will take approximately 15 to 20 minutes for your son or daughter to get through the building, pick up their textbooks, and get back out of the building. That said, outside of the building is where we hope that they'll be checking in, provided that the weather is good. So the whole process might take as long as half an hour, but if they are driving themselves, or if you as a parent or guardian are driving them, yes, we would ask that you wait in the parking lot. We actually cannot have outside visitors in our building, only our students during phase 4 of our instruction. I thought I saw another August 31st question. I'm going to try and find that one quickly here. Thanks for your patience. Maybe. Oh, someone asked, will schedules be available before August 31st, the first day? And I answered that in the back channel, not before the first day. No, actually, our counselors are still scheduling students. We've got some enrollments and withdrawals and things like that that are shifting classes and students around in classes. And actually, historically, we don't give the schedules out before the first day of school. So it's not any different this year than it would be any other year in terms of when the students get their final schedules. Here's another question related to transportation. I think that we answered this one, Eric. I think you might have answered it in the FAQ because a parent asked it last night relating to bus transportation. The transportation office stated that students will be removed from the transportation list if they do not use the bus 3 times in a row. All students will follow online lessons. They will not use the school bus. Can this policy be changed about the transportation and the consecutive riding policy?
Yes, actually, like Tamara pointed out last night, one of our moms asked that exact same question. Really, the transportation department is really trying to get a sense of how do they socially distance students when they're in a bus. So they're working really hard to try to figure out how many kids are going to be riding each particular bus, knowing that they won't be able to do everything they hope to do. And that is to say, if our son or daughter is off the bus for 3 days and is no longer in the bus roll, that is easily fixed. All you have to do is call the transportation department. In fact, off my memory, though don't always trust my memory, is 323, I think it's 5151, but that is on the frequently asked questions under transportation. And as soon as you call them, they'll get your son or daughter right back on the rolls again, so you can use transportation again, so that our sons and daughters can get the support when they need it, and not necessarily when they don't need it. So yeah, great question.
We've got another question about the teachers versus staff members. Where are these people?
Yes, that is.
I'm paraphrasing, but I think that what people are wondering is, okay, so you've got students who are in building and part of the building, and who's actually monitoring them? What are their roles in a typical year? And then where are the teachers during this? If I, as a parent, need to get in touch with the room supervisor, how do I do that? Do I contact you as the principal, or how can I go about letting that person know some things about my child if I need to get them that information?
Yes, that is a wonderful question. And in fact, if you don't mind, I'm going to present something to you right now, just to kind of so we all have a visual of kind of what we're talking about. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to show you Portage Central High School, if I may, just for a moment. While you do that, is this big enough? Can you see it well enough? Let me try to move this around a little bit, if I may. All right.
That's pretty good, I think.
Is it pretty good? Okay. So obviously on a normal day, actually, let me take a step back from the question just for a moment. One of the many interesting things that this summer and last spring provided is many, many more new Portage families. We have had so many folks move into our community here in just the last 2 months, which is wonderful. And it also provides new problems. That is to say, we are going to be bigger than we have been as a school in about 15 years. So that logistical question that you guys are asking, that someone asked about, like where is everyone going to be, is one that we have worked really hard at. So in a nutshell, though, our teachers are going to be essentially in the academic wings, the 2 towers that you see right at the front of Portage Central High School. They'll be in their classrooms teaching their classes just like they always have. It'll just be an online version of that. And so just like always, you can reach out to those teachers by sending them an email, by looking at our school's website. You can find their phone number and all of that. But our support staff, so that our colleagues who are helping with in-building support, they will be mostly along the Mustang Way. So they'll be in rooms that, for example, that we call the Learning Center or the Study Lab, or this is a room right here that we used to have an English class in our deaf and hard of hearing and our American Sign Language class in there. Our community rooms, choir rooms, auditorium lobbies, and a number of other what we call common spaces that we have that we'll be having open for our kids getting in-building support. So whereas our teachers are in the academic areas, our in-building support will be in all those common use areas where we can have kids, again, be socially distant and have that monitor. But the other question I heard in that question was, how do I reach out and talk to that in-school or in-building support monitor? And the best way to do that is not by calling me. That is to say, I am not too often in my office on a given school day. I would encourage you to call the main desk, 323-5200. You can talk to Suzanne or Jill. They are awesome, amazing colleagues who do really terrific work. On any given day, you can give Suzanne and Jill a call. If you just have a message that you want to get to your son or daughter, they will write that down and get it delivered right down to them. Or if there's something they want to share with an in-building support colleague, they'll let you know who that person is. So let's say, for example, on a given day, your son or daughter, maybe for this week, is in 11:30. In 11:30, Nate Turner, who's one of our colleagues, who's one of our hall supervisors, and also happens to be one of our coaches, he is going to be the in-building support colleague for room 1130. So if you were to call Jill and Suzanne, they would let you know Nate's name. You could drop him an email. When he's not with students, you could give him a call and have whatever that communication needs to have. So we are really relying on really wonderful colleagues like Carol Cutler and Rob Brown, who do all kinds of work around here, who are going to be working really with kids this year for the entire time that we're in phase 4. So I'm hoping that kind of gives you a sense of what things look like when kids are in and where they're going to be and who they're working with during in-building support. I'm going to stop the presenting.
All right, we've got a couple other questions about August 31st. One parent asked, when is the bus coming to pick up kids on August 31st? Could we instead bring our kids to school? The answer regarding the bus, if you have scheduled transportation with our buses, the best thing to do would be to contact our transportation office. They'd be able to give you the pickup time, the exact pickup times for students. But regarding the second part of that question, on the 31st, if they are planning on riding the bus on every other day, is it still okay if we bring our kids to school on the 31st? And the answer is yes. If you have a car and you want to drive it to school, drive your student to school, even if your child typically rides the bus, you can bring them here. Like we said earlier, it's possible maybe you joined the meeting late. What we said was there are no online classes on August 31st. Instead, the students are being asked to come to school to pick up their textbooks only. That's what they're doing. They're getting their schedules. They're picking up their textbooks. They're getting to see their teacher. They'll be masked and socially distanced, but they'll be able to see them in their classroom. And then they'll be leaving. That whole process is going to take about a half an hour. So if they're a bus rider and there's no other way they can get to school, then they'll ride the bus. We'll put them in one of our support locations, like Eric just mentioned, and then they'll hang out there until the end of the half day, and then they'll take the bus home. But if they don't ride the bus and you bring them in your vehicle, you would bring them in the vehicle. They would get out of the car. They'd be in our building for about 20 to 25 minutes. Again, it depends, and then they'd get back in the car, and then you take them wherever they're going to go next. So those are the answers to those questions. And then we had a question about whether or not the maps, like are freshmen going to know where to go? There will be maps posted throughout the hallways. I mentioned that we have our link crew leaders. Those are our mentors for our freshmen, will be visible and available to freshmen. We also have our staff members who are pretty good and good at recognizing lost students, and they will comfort them and reassure them and help them get to where they need to go. And I thought there was one other question that related to the 31st. So again, thank you for your patience. Well, maybe that one was it. Okay, this one has been sitting there for a while, and I know that it's another huge question, so we'll just jump right into that one, and then I'll continue monitoring our back channel. But Eric, can you please explain what Fridays are going to look like?
Yes, that is a question that actually we're still working on as of today. We just left a department chair meeting at about 4:30, where it's exactly what we're working on right now, exactly what Fridays look like. Before we jump into that, just me to do another quick reminder. Don't forget, if any of us have left or have started this meeting a little later, just know that we are recording this meeting and that we will be posting it to our Portage Central High School YouTube channel here in the next day or two, so that anyone who can't make it tonight can get a chance to watch and get their questions answered. But Fridays, okay. Fridays, the mornings are really treasured for the amount of time we're going to have for our teachers to interact with individual students. So, for example, one of the questions that happened earlier is, what happens if my son or daughter is absent on a Tuesday? What do you do to try to get caught up to speed? Friday mornings can be part of that answer, where our son or daughter reaches out to the teacher or the teacher to the son or daughter. They set up a Google Meet just like we're doing right here, and they talk through the assignment. They talk about whatever they need to do, any misunderstandings. That is going to be among the biggest priorities. How do we catch up kids given these difficult circumstances that we're working under right now? One big part of it. Second part of it is us as colleagues reaching out to kids we're anxious about, because this is a very different way of going about doing our work. And just like we're first-year teachers getting used to all this, our kids are going to be essentially first-year students, even if they're a senior. And so that's one of the things that we want to spend time monitoring, looking out for our sons and daughters. When we see some trends about kids who are not engaging with us, that's what Friday morning is going to be about. Us taking some time as teachers and other colleagues, reaching out to those students, finding out what's going on, seeing if they need some other support to make sure that they can be as successful in this experience as we can possibly make them. So Friday mornings, that's really what the emphasis is going to be about, getting students and teachers talking to each other. Friday afternoons are going to be a little bit different. Friday afternoons, we're going to be spending a lot of time in learning, us as teachers. That is to say, us as teachers trying to figure out all the tools of the trade. And this is a new trade for us. Teachers, many of us, we entered this profession because we like and we treasure this human interaction that we have for each other. An interaction that's much more difficult in an online world than it is in a normal classroom. So what that means is we as teachers need to continue to prepare and acquire new skills so that we can do as good of a job as we possibly can. We know we're not going to be as good in week 1 as we will be in week 15. And that learning happens by us as teachers interacting with each other, working, sharing good ideas so that we can do that. So Friday is really, the morning's going to be student focused, and the afternoon's going to be teacher focused, with us learning how to do our jobs better. Really big and important day for all of us, no doubt about it.
All right, we have some really good questions again. Somebody asked about a class roster. I'm interpreting that to mean their schedules. They'll get their schedules on the first day when they arrive, again on August 31st. If you have more questions about the first day, we've answered quite a few questions about that, and I would maybe hang on at the end of the meeting so we can repeat that information, just so that we can continue on with some of these other questions that have been lingering out there for a while. One of them, which is kind of cool, and I'll give you an easy one, Eric. Someone's asking about whether or not there will ever be PC masks for sale.
Oh, yes. Well, that's funny you say that. First of all, our band has sold truly like hundreds of them. I'm kind of partial to one of our teachers, Mangling Road. She makes them, and I particularly like them as well. Our student council right now is working on a fundraiser for student council that they want to invest in our student clubs, because student clubs, if there's something that I really want to spend time talking about tonight, is how do we keep our kids engaged with us on emotional, on a social, on a cultural level. Student clubs and student activities and events and athletics are going to be hugely important for that. Hugely important for that. We can talk more about that at a later time. But the truth of the matter is, yes, you will be seeing maybe more than you want to of Portage Central High School masks here in the weeks and months ahead. Yeah, thanks for throwing me a softball, Tam. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. And then to follow that up, I'll answer this one. Someone asked, what happens if my son or daughter forgets their mask? Because my son or daughter, I mean, I can see myself doing this sometimes. Like, will there be any extra masks available if I accidentally forget my mask? And the answer is yes. We will have disposable masks for students if they forgot theirs at home.
Absolutely.
Eric, one that's a little bit more complicated and probably would require more explanation is, how long is this model that we're currently in going to last? And is it going to last through phase 4? Is there any chance that it might change before the end of phase 4? Will it change when we get to phase 5? Can you explain that a little bit?
I can. Yes, this is what many folks worked on throughout the course of the summer. Just for some background, actually, for much of the summer, teacher colleagues were working on a hybrid model. That is to say, having half of our kids for 2 days and the other half of our kids for the other 2 days. And then we chose to move we chose as a community move in a different direction. That is to say, the direction we're in right now. That is all online instruction, Monday through Thursday, and then that supportive Friday morning that we talked about. This will continue. This model that we have will continue for the entire time that we are in phase 4, or heaven forbid that we have to move back to phase 3. What we're all hoping for, without question, is phase 5. That is to say, as soon as we, as either the whole state or our location of phase 5, because you probably know that some parts of Michigan are already in phase 5, northern Michigan and parts of the Upper Peninsula. But when our area moves to phase 5, we get our kids back. We are back to our normal school day with our kids in the building, interacting with one another the way we love to do with our kids. So we are very much looking forward to that day, that phase 5. When will phase 5 happen? That's the much harder question, where people far, far smarter than me are working on that, and I don't have much to share with you. But I can say that whenever we're in phase 3 or 4, 4 being what we're in right now, we will be following this online approach. And as soon as we get to phase 5, as fast as humanly possible, we will be moving right back to teaching and learning with our kids and teachers working right next to each other. So yeah, that is a really important distinction. So thanks for asking that.
All right. If my child has signed up for the PPS virtual without in-building support, so they're going to be home on Mondays through Thursdays, if they need in-person help, can they set that up with their teacher?
Absolutely. In fact, that's exactly what we'd encourage. So for example, let's say I was one of you, let's say I was your in-building supports colleague for your son or daughter for a given week. No one wants to ask me math help. You just don't want to. And so what that means is, again, we're going to be trying to do everything we can to get our sons and daughters talking with their individual teachers. So exactly when there are those questions happening, we want them reaching out to each other. So for example, a math teacher is visiting with that student when they can both make that work using Google Meet. So they can see each other, they can talk to each other, they can ask questions, they can use sample problems, teachers can give demonstrations that students can watch, and all the other tools that we're using in this online world to make sure that our sons and daughters learn what they need to learn. Because nothing is more important from my perspective. It's more important than ever to have our kids and our teachers talking to each other. And right now it's through the prism that is Google Meet. But again, we want to encourage that every single time we have that chance.
Does that mean that they can set up an appointment face-to-face, though?
No, that does not mean they can set up an appointment face-to-face. All of those interactions right now will happen through Google Meet. And like I said, whether that's before school, after school, during their seminar, or on Friday mornings, or whenever else teachers can meet. But right now, teachers and students can work out their schedules to have that interaction. But all of that will right now go through an online platform, that is to say Google Meet, not face-to-face at this point.
All right, we have a couple of questions about the ACT, SAT, and other standardized. The question is, assuming social distancing guidelines need to be followed in October, how will our SATs be facilitated safely on site, on time, with any pre-screening requirements?
Yes, great question, because you probably know the College Board. The College Board is who organizes the SAT. They have not done a single testing session since nationwide, since we all shut down back in March. I mean, truly, I think all of us have tough jobs. I have no idea how incredibly difficult it must be for the colleagues who work at the College Board to figure out every state and everything that's going on. So we know that the College Board has a lot of things that they're working through to figure out how do they actually make this happen. What we know is that we're going to do everything we can to provide the SAT to our seniors and the PSAT to our juniors. In fact, we actually have some dates that I might be able to call up here in this conversation at some point that we're looking at right now. I think it's mid-October. October 14th is what we're really hoping to do for our seniors. And then shortly after that, I think it's the following week, and I don't have that date at my fingertips, I apologize, for our juniors. Keep in mind, that will be completely voluntary. Normally, our seniors, it's actually a graduation requirement that they take the SAT. In this case, it would not be. We are not going to ask any our sons and daughters we're not going to require them to come in the building. And we want to make it available to every single one of our seniors and every single one of our juniors so that we can provide them an SAT, because it does opened some doors for many of our sons and daughters, and we want to make sure we provide that resource to them without question. Having said that, at the same time, we're going to have to take that day. We're taking all of these days incredibly seriously, those days in particular, because we will have to clear the decks. That is to say, we wouldn't be able to offer in-building support during that time. We won't be teaching because every single person associated with Portage Central High School is going to be here on that day, making sure that we have a safe system where we have classrooms where we are all socially distanced, everyone wearing masks, so that we can make sure that students who want to have the opportunity to take the SAT, they get that opportunity, and we do it in a really, really safe way. My hope is that the College Board will also be ready by the 16th. That's what everyone is shooting for and everyone is hoping for. And we will be getting more information out to you as moms and dads, as well as a sign up for you to sign up your son or daughter about whether they want to do that as a junior or as a senior on those days. So stay tuned to that in your email. We'll be getting that information out. But that is a really important value for us to make sure that we, at least our sons and daughters, have that option if they so choose to do that.
All right. Another question is related to how group work will be monitored during virtual learning. I can take that one if you don't mind, Eric.
That would be wonderful.
Okay. One of the ways that teachers are going to be able to monitor group work, number one, to check on engagement. It's going to be different than the classroom, but they can still use techniques that are similar to face-to-face instruction by creating those group meets in advance. Students will be assigned into those meets, but because the teacher owns those links, they will pop in and out. They have the ability to pop in and out of those groups, of those breakout groups. So that is one way that they can monitor groups. Another way is if they're not working on a video platform, but maybe the group is working on a shared document. That isn't something else that the teacher can ask the students to share with them so that the teacher can pop in and out of those documents as well. So those are a couple ways that the teachers will be able to monitor breakout sessions. It's not exactly the same as using physical proximity in the classroom, but because the teacher can pop in and out, it has that similar effect, if everybody understands what I mean by that.
Yeah, could I add something to that, Tama? Do you mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I had a chance to watch that on Monday. As many of you as moms and dads know, if you have a son or a daughter who's a freshman, that was when our freshman orientation was, the first online or freshman orientation we've ever had. I'm kind of hoping it's our last. But it was really cool to watch folks like Rob Hoopengardner, like Nikki Smith, like Shannon Skippers, Liz Honeysett, Ann Albertus, that each of them had a few classrooms as teachers. They're watching in, and they stopped in each of those classrooms, checked on our juniors and seniors to see how they're doing, what kind of support they're needing, but also checked on our freshmen. So it is a really handy resource. I think if we were all, as difficult as this is to experience what we're all experiencing, I'm glad if it had to happen, I'm glad it's happening now than even a year or two ago. There are just so many more tools that teachers have today that they didn't have before, so that we can actually facilitate this, to be able to keep teaching and learning going despite the challenges that are in front of us. So it is really cool to watch.
All right, speaking of Link Crew, we had a question about the Link Crew shirt and what that looks like. I don't have a picture right now. Eric, do you have one?
I do.
Okay, so Eric will go get that. And then there's another question about lunches and how lunches work. So I'll try my best to explain it. The lunches are going to be pre-ordered this year through the sendmoneytoschool.com account. They're going to be using an online form for students to indicate what meal they would like for lunch, and those would need to be ordered by 9:30 a.m. And again, I'm using the information that I knew as of a couple of days ago. If something has changed since then, I apologize, but that is the information that I know right now, is that they'll be pre-ordering. The link will be sent out to students so that they have that ability to order lunch. And that way it gives our kitchen staff an opportunity to know what they need to make that particular day. And regarding how we are going to get the students that are here for in-building support to the lunchroom, they will be cohorted in the lunchroom so that they remain in that cohort with that same group of students, separated from other cohorts of students, if that makes sense. Eric, do you want to elaborate on that at all? So maybe you're a little better at it.
Yes. So, for example, if you can picture that map again, or if we like, we can call it back up again. But if I'm that Nate Turner, who's working with our about 16 students in that classroom in the Mustang Way, during lunchtime, they need to leave that classroom because we need to sanitize the classrooms. One of the protocols that we learned from the CDC is every 4 hours, a classroom needs to be cleaned out. And there's a whole sanitation process that happens in that classroom. And our students head down to the commons, where they will be in the commons, but they'll be still together as a group with all those tables grouped together, again, maintaining socially distance. That is a place where students can take off their mask and be able to eat their lunch. And then when that sanitation process in their classrooms are done, they head right back to their classrooms. Two, forgive me, because our last senior boy, and it's always the boys, he needed about 2 weeks of reminders to finally pick up his Link Crew leader shirt. And it was sitting just out there this morning. I saw it, and he finally must have picked it up. But the shirts are kind of unmistakable, and they're hard to miss because they're tie-dyed. They are really, really tie-dyed. So if there's no way to mistake one of our junior and senior Link Crews, because it's a tie-dyed shirt, really bright, and on the back it says Link Crew. So I don't think there'll be any way to mistake them. Yeah, thanks for asking that.
Thanks, Eric. We've got another question regarding clubs. Is there going to be a social justice club formed this year? This parent says that their daughter had a great experience in middle school and there was no club to support her and others when she came here to PC. What are we doing for our Black and Brown students? We have race issues, as we know. What support is being done for students attending our school?
Yeah, in fact, I was actually just talking to one of our, by emailing back and forth with our moms today, because our first, actually a new club started the day before we closed down. We had about 40 students. Many of the students were students, mostly Black students, who met for breakfast. We had a great conversation. Some of the student leadership actually have continued to work throughout the course of the summer. One of the projects they want to work on is a drive-in theater night. We're using some of the equipment that we have that we used during graduation for a showing of Selma. So right now they're actually looking into seeing if we can get the rights to show that to our kids. And that has been that student club. I'm grateful to see has continued work. We definitely lost momentum, no doubt about it. Yes, Portage Central High School is a wonderful place, and like any organization, it is deeply imperfect. And those imperfections show in some particular ways historically. And issues of race is definitely one of those that we have constantly struggled and worked on and struggled with. So that group is going to continue. In fact, Carolyn Moore, Liz Honeysett, Nate Turner actually just got together a couple of days ago to have conversations about when that club is meeting next and what those next things are on their to-do list. And so I'm really looking forward to see what they do. I know they've already reached out to student council to see if that club and student council want to sponsor a couple of those drive-in theater nights, which would be a wonderful way to engage with our kids, which I touched on before. But truly, I think there's a lot of things that I become anxious about when I look at the school year ahead. Academic growth, it's not one of them. That is to say, I know our kids, I know our teachers, we will have good days and bad days, but the kids that we're blessed to work with and the teachers we're blessed to work with, they will give each other the grace and the support and work that they need in order for our kids to meet the academic goals that we have. I have no doubt about that. What my biggest worry is what that particular parent touched on. How do we continue to stay socially, emotionally, culturally engaged with one another? How do we continue to grow? One of the things we always talk about at freshman orientation is if our kids are only successful in the classroom, they're missing half of what Portage Central High School is all about, maybe more than half. Those social interactions if there's one thing I am most anxious about, it's that. How do we, in this online COVID world, how do we still help our kids get in contact with each other, have relationships with each other, interact with each other in really real and meaningful ways, in the ways that we've always done that before, our clubs, our athletics, our marching band, and so many of those things, that some of which we've been able to continue to exist, For example, marching band was practicing tonight, some parts of it, and some of them have not been able to continue to exist. For example, football, as you know, was moved to the spring. So that is one of my biggest anxieties, and one of the things we're going to be working on most intensely at the start of the school year is how do we keep to continuing our clubs and other activities to get our kids to interact with each other, despite the limitations around us, so they continue to share each other's values and work on developing the relationships that all of us know are so incredibly important in the high school experience. So forgive me, I kind of took that off as an aside, but it is really, really important and a huge value that we want to work with and that we need your help with. That as you have ideas and thoughts about how we can do it, we need that feedback so we can figure out how do we go about doing this really important work that truly in this context we have never done before.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions about freshmen and technology again. Specifically, will the incoming freshmen keep their Chromebooks from middle school? And then a related question, if tech has our Chromebooks right now because they're being repaired, what do we do if we haven't got them back yet?
Yes. The first part is yes, you maintain the same Chromebooks that you've been using ever since, but knowing that, like as the person who asked the question acknowledged, Chromebooks break sometimes. That is the nature of high school and middle school kids using equipment. Heck, that's the nature of me using equipment. If you have a need, there is actually a website that we can, in fact, we should post that to our frequently asked questions if I haven't already done so, where you can, if you haven't already let us know about a repair, you can hit that website, give us the information you need. And typically what we can do is either fix that pretty quickly or get you a loaner that you can use. Especially for those kids who are coming in for in-building support, we'll have a few to check out. But there is a bit of a rub right now. As I mentioned, we have had a ton of wonderful families move to Portage Central High School's community. And so right now, it's tight. We have some on back order right now to order more. So we might have a few days of that first week where that will be short. So I would just beg your forgiveness and patience as we work through that. And again, just keep communicating to us to let us know what's going on. So that we can keep working on things. And again, that repair website is really helpful, and we try to work really hard to get you your Chromebook back right away.
Thanks. We have another question about if I have a new student and they're getting their Chromebook here on site, when are they going to get their student IDs and login passwords? I can take that one. We're going to be, when a student is assigned his or her Chromebook, they're going to be given a document signing off on our network agreements and our password agreements. Once they've signed that paperwork and they are fully enrolled in our system, then that is when we would be giving them their login passwords. So it depends on whether or not the student has been fully processed in our student information system and whether or not they've signed those network and password agreements. All right, we've got a couple other questions that are related to one another. Bell schedules.
Yes.
When will we know the bell schedule, and why? Maybe not why, but how does our bell schedule compare with the middle school? Is there a reason why ours is not the same as the middle school? They are just kind of thinking about screen breaks and how that's going to work and why our schedule might look differently than the middle school. So if you could talk a little bit more about what our schedule might look like, when it's going to be final, and why it might look different than the middle school schedule, please.
You will actually be getting that bell schedule tomorrow in our weekly email because it is a little different. I wonder if I can grab it really fast and give you guys a sneak peek if you don't mind. If I can get it really fast. Don't look at my mechanics or grammar because I haven't actually finished all the writing and so forth. And so there it is. I found it. So let me present that real fast. Because it is something that we have thought about a great deal, is our screen breaks. Let's see, how well can you see that, Tama?
If you can zoom in a little bit, that would be wonderful.
A little more?
A little more. Scroll down just a bit. There, that looks pretty good.
There we go. Again, I think we all acknowledge that no one wants any of our kids on a screen for 7 hours in a row. That is not something that any of us want. Um, how do we deal with that? We're going to deal with that in a lot of different ways. And the biggest way we're dealing with it is making sure kids get breaks. That is a huge part of it. So you can see as you look at that schedule, we're following the normal 7-period day that we've always had. And keep in mind, the middle school schedule and the high school schedule has always been actually a little bit different from each other for a variety of reasons. But you can see there too that we're going to have 15-minute passing periods between the classes. And that is very, very intentionally done. As we've worked so that our kids can have a break from the screen, have time just to work, or have time just to breathe, time to walk outside for a little bit and relax and try to get away from everything that's going on as far as on school. I think we all know that high school experience is intense. You take a normal school day without all the difficulties that we're going through right here, where our kids go through a 7-period day, and then after school, maybe have practice or do an activity, and then have an hour or two, or sometimes, God forbid, 3 hours of homework due a particular night. You look at that, that's a lot of hours. We can't replicate that totally online. We know that. And because we know we don't perceive it's healthy to spend that much time in the screen. So for our kids who are at home, we'll be following that schedule, again, to have breaks. And also our kids who are in-building support will also follow that schedule. And at least one time in the morning and one time in the afternoon, we're going to take them for a walk, where all of those in-support colleagues or in-building support colleagues will be leaving the classroom, walking outside, walking out in the back by the pool patio or other places here, just for our kids to have a chance to breathe and take a step away. So that is a sense of what the schedule looks like, knowing that nothing about this is written in stone. Again, we haven't done this before. This is our first stab at it. And so in the days and weeks ahead, if this schedule is working well for us, we would love that feedback, absolutely. And if in the days and weeks ahead, this schedule is not working for us, we love to have that feedback. We need that so that we can make the tweaks and the changes we need to make over the course of time, so that we can, hopefully by the end of this whole thing, be a lot better at it than we were at the very beginning of it. So that kind of hopefully gives you a sense of schedule. That schedule right there, I hope there's no mechanicals or spelling errors that you notice there. If you do, just send me an email because I'll fix it. I'll be sending this email out to you before I go to sleep sometime tomorrow. So you'll have that right at the ready, and we'll send out reminders about that as well. Speaking of reminders, this is just a good reminder for anyone who's entered this conversation late that we are recording this session so that families who couldn't be here tonight can watch this. It'll be posted to our YouTube channel as well, and it'll also have closed captioning so that any folks who couldn't be here tonight can get a chance to watch that and hopefully have their questions answered as well. So thank you for that.
All right, related to the bell schedule, what about attendance? What do I do if my child is going to be absent because they're sick for any amount of the day or a full day? Do we call the attendance line? Do we reach out to the individual teacher? Do I need to worry about excusing absences? How does that work?
Yes. So much of what we normally do in schools, things like excused or unexcused absence, tardies, things like the 10th absence rule, as far as making sure our kids are here at least fewer than 10 absences to make sure they earn the credit they need. Those are things that won't exist in this online environment. So for example, Ryan Hammett, who is awesome and is our attendance officer for a lot of years, he won't be in the attendance office anymore. He will be in building support classrooms helping our students during this particular time. With that understanding, the most important places where those conversations need to happen is between us as moms and dads and our sons and those teachers, so that they know, our teachers know what's going on. We can have the conversations we need to have to get kids caught up on absence that they have. So again, while we're in phase 4, while we're doing this online learning, those normal systems that we have in place won't exist for attendance. And really, it'll put the emphasis on really where it needs to be. That is to say, between our students, between our teachers, to make sure that they're talking with each other to get them the support that they need, especially when they miss absences, because our kids are going to be absent sometimes, and that's okay. We just want to make sure that we have a follow-up approach and conversations between our kids and our teachers so that everyone is on the same page about what they need to accomplish. So that was a great nuts and bolts question. I'm grateful someone asked that.
Thanks, Eric. Again, kind of related, if my child is absent or ill and misses class, or even if they're not absent or ill and just struggling in a class, how are teachers going to address the students who are struggling with their grades? And I think that just in case anybody missed his description of Fridays, Eric, can you touch on that just one more time, maybe briefly?
Yeah, please. Again, we want to do everything we can to encourage conversations and discussions between all of our kids and all of our teachers, particularly students who are struggling with understanding what's going on. Some of these things that we teach in our school are difficult to learn in the real circumstance. And then they will, in this online environment, will create new hurdles that we will have to find ways to work through. So some of that will happen right during the school day. For example, maybe during a seminar where we can set up an appointment between a student and a teacher during our seminar or his seminar. Could happen before school or after school. We use Google Meet as a tool, again, to get those interactions. But like Tama talked about, Friday mornings are going to be incredibly important for us. Friday mornings, we're going to build big fences around so we as teachers and people like me don't put meetings there, don't put anything else there. That emphasis on Friday mornings will be for our teachers and our kids to connect with each other, to support one another, to make sure that everyone knows what's going on, so all of our sons and daughters have the support that they need. That will be a hugely, hugely important resource. And it's one of the reasons I'm glad we have those Friday mornings just set aside, earmarked, so individual teachers and students can talk with each other to make sure that they're getting what they need. So thanks for bringing that up again.
Thanks. Again, kind of working with the teachers and knowing what has happened in years past, in past years, there has been an open house where parents could meet the teachers and get a sense for what the work is going to be like in the classroom and just say hello. Is that something that the district has talked about?
Actually, remember I mentioned that we had a conversation among department chairs right before this meeting. That is that's one of the things we talked about, is what does open house look like? That we have never done this before, and we're not exactly sure what it looks like. Let me back off that question just for a second. Remember going back to that first day of school. Why did we say that first day of school is important for every student to be here for those 15 to 20 to 30 minutes, moving through the building? One of the most important things is they get the supplies that they need. They get their textbooks, they get the other things that they need, so they don't always have to rely on screen time. But right on the heels of that is having at least a quick connection, a quick development of relationship between our sons and daughters and their teachers. That can make the world a difference, where we're not anonymous to each other, that we at least know each other, we see each other's face, we can recognize each other despite the masks. That is incredibly important, to have that relationship between our students and our teachers. That is equally true with us as parents, with our teachers, without question. This relationship is among the most important thing we do as parents. I mean, think about it. Our teachers have such an impact on our sons and daughters. And that means we have to trust one another. We have to work with one another. And so how do we use the opportunities that we have to develop those relationships that are built on trust? That is a real challenge that I'd be honest with you right now that we don't have figured out. That we know that we will have some sort of open house. Likely we'll have an online component to it because we value it and we want to develop those relationships. What exactly that'll look like, I really don't know. But I can say is stay tuned, because it's happening fast. I think it's like September 9th, if I'm not mistaken. It's like 2 weeks away. Might be, yeah, I think it is. So that is what we're working on furiously right now, because that is what we've worked on throughout the summer. Throughout the summer, everything we're building here is brand new. In a normal year, we have systems, we have practices, we have traditions in place that guide our work. Right now, with your help, with your questions and your feedback, we're building everything brand new. So please be watching for your email, and we'll send you information about what open house looks like so that we can keep developing the relationships that we need in order to have the trust we need, so that we can all help all of our students here. So thanks.
Thank you, Eric. We have a couple of questions. I'm going to tie them together. One is about testing and what will testing look like? Not SAT testing, but testing in the classroom. What kinds of assessments should we expect to see our students taking in virtual learning? And then there's a separate question that I can quickly answer before you go back to the other one, or if you want me to answer both, I'm happy to do that. It's up to you. Okay. The other question is about IB exams. I'm going to start with that one because that is an easier answer. The question was, what are IB exams going to look like this year? And I think the answer is it depends on what the IBO says. The IB is going to make the determination on what their exams look like in a given year, and they'll communicate that information out to our teachers, who will communicate that out to their students. So please stay tuned to messages from our IB coordinator, Eric Lancaster, who will be reaching out with that kind of exam information. He'll let you know what is happening with IB exams and how those might be modified or might not be modified by the end of this year. Do you want to add anything to that, Eric, regarding the IB?
I'm glad you said that, except for the only thing I would add is that, for example, that's really important for all of our classes, but particularly important for our science classes. Our science classes have lab components that are part of the IB assessments in a normal year. So if, in fact, we're already, John Taylor and I were just talking in the hall this morning before school started, thinking about what can we do to prepare our kids to do those labs. So that is on the forefront of our mind, as so many things are, of course, but because we know with the IB assessments, that can have a huge impact on students' futures. Where our sons and daughters, we're lucky that we have that opportunity because they can earn college credits as a result of being successful in those assessments. So despite the fact those assessments don't happen to May, they're already right now being talked and thought about so we can figure out creative ways in order to address it. But Tam is absolutely right. Ultimately, at the end of the day, IB is the one who lets us know what the testing situation looks like. That will go to, and we'll take their directions absolutely and make sure we prepare our kids for it.
Thanks. The second question was related to what assessments are going to look like in the virtual classroom, specifically unit tests as an example. And our teachers were participating in some pretty awesome professional development in these past couple weeks. They engaged in what we call Teach Camp here in Portage, which is homegrown professional development by our amazing teachers, technology specialists, and engagement specialists. We actually even had a parent who is a virtual teacher come in and do a presentation for our staff. And so they're learning lots of different techniques and ways to assess students in a virtual learning environment. It might look different or it might look the same. For example, if I'm a history teacher, my assessments will be written maybe rather than using multiple choice. Would I use some multiple choice? Maybe. But there are ways that you can adapt the lessons and the assessments that you've used in the past in face-to-face instruction so that it works in a environment that is virtual. In fact, I was talking with a colleague just today about how to do quizzes over some of the content in AP Government. And it was a really awesome conversation because we thought of 5 or 6 different ways that we could arrange an assessment and still give students a way to think and also hold them accountable for doing the work and self-learning and really pushing themselves so that it isn't something that's necessarily rote and that you can easily memorize. So those are the types of conversations that teachers are having with each other, with our leadership at the district level in technology, so that they're prepared and ready to give the kinds of assessments that one would take in a virtual learning environment. Another question, hopefully that answers that person's question. Another question that came up that I think we didn't answer fully. So if you don't mind, I'm going to present my screen. Someone was asking on September 1st, if I'm a student, how do I even know where to go? Like, how am I going to know how to log in to class if it's virtual? And the answer is on the 31st, on the first half day of school, they will be loaded into what's called a Google Classroom. If you're not familiar with a Google Classroom, what's really neat is one of our tech specialists, Jessica Winstanley, has designed a website. And before I leave, I will post that website into our chat so that you can access it. It teaches you as a parent all about this Google Classroom module and the deployment techniques that the teachers use. But I'll show you a glimpse of it right now, since I'm able to do that. Eric, can you see my screen?
Yep, I can now.
Okay, so you'll see I named this test class. I was doing some professional development with teachers this morning, so that's why it says test class. What your student would see would be the name of the class up at the top, and then they would see right here the meeting link. That is the meet link that the student would use for that particular class every day. So they would need to make sure that they're logged in to that meet every day. Another way that they might get it is by emailing it out on the first day of school. But most teachers are going to be deploying that link by Google Classroom. Google Classroom is going to be the only course deployment tool used. It's going to be the hub for all instruction in Portage Public Schools this school year. If you have more questions about Google Classroom, like I said, I'll post the link to our parent help page so that you can learn a little bit more about it from a parent perspective. All right. Another question, if I have a Wi-Fi connection problem, or if I get booted out of a class, how do I resolve that problem? How can I get in touch with my teacher? Is there a particular number I should call? What should I do in those cases? I would instruct your student to really talk with your teacher at the beginning of their class. And we've talked to teachers, and teachers have a plan to explain what to do in those types of unforeseen circumstances. Just like in the face-to-face classroom, we've gotten involved a lot more with technology over time, and internet outages happen, and teachers just run with it. They figure it out, and they might email their students. They would probably post something later and instruct them what to do. But those types of anticipated problems will be discussed by teachers in their opening days of class. Like, what do I do if this happens? What do I do if that happens? And if it's something that's completely unexpected and unanticipated, the teachers will roll with it. I have faith in our staff to figure those types of things out. And our students are very bright too. So they'll be able to reach out to their teachers, or figure out a way to reach out to us if they're really struggling. Another question, Eric, maybe for you, related to screen time. How might homework be changed, or is homework going to change? Are homework policies changing to try and get kids off of screens after school hours?
Yeah, actually, this is interesting on a whole different levels. And not to bore you, but if I could just back off your question just for a second. We just last week, the state legislature, both houses approved it, and it was signed by the governor, a whole new set of expectations for us as schools that we're still working through what that means for us. Some of that has more to do with pupil accounting and that sort of stuff that's not particularly relevant, but part of it has to do exactly what this question deals with. One of the things that the state legislature has made really, really clear is that whatever our typical curriculum is, that if we want to access state funding, which of course schools need to do to stay open, we must teach our full curriculum, just like we would in any normal year. So that is legally binding for us as schools. And we value that too. I mean, if we set up curriculums for all of these classes, and then we know by following these curricula, they will support our kids to be successful wherever they go after high school, whether they do an IB assessments or AP assessments, or the other things that are important to us. So we value that too. And it has this added emphasis that it's now state law, that we must address all the aspects of our curriculum. So on one hand, we can see one part, right, where we have some anxieties about screen time. That we know that our sons and daughters need breaks. They need to have time to breathe. They need to be away from their computer at times, and be thoughtful about that. And at the same time, we have the same expectations academically as we always have, in part because that's who we are, and in part because that is now state law, and we follow those state laws. And so that is what we as a school and every school is going to have to work through. Now, on one hand, we want to have high expectations for our kids. That is one thing that we make very, very clear, that we will never apologize for having high expectations for our kids. Because one thing that we've learned at Portage Central High School over the many, many decades is if we hold our kids to high expectations, by and large, they achieve them and they exceed them. When they understand that we believe they can succeed. So we want to have those high expectations and recognize that our kids need to have time to break. So the reason I say that is that we don't fully know what that's going to look like and feel like over the course of the school year. Balancing those two incredibly important values, we'll be a lot better at that at Thanksgiving than we are at Labor Day. There is no doubt about that. But that's also where I can't say strongly enough how much we need your feedback. Your feedback as moms and dads, as you talk to your sons and daughters, to communicate that to people like me, communicate to people like Tama or Jason Frank, another one of our principals, or to the teachers that our sons and daughters work with, so we can figure out where that balance is. That is a part that there's no doubt we as teacher colleagues are anxious about. When we're in a classroom, touching base with our kids, walking by them, brushing elbows, talking to them in the hall, we can get a read on how they're doing more often than not, how they're feeling and whether they're keeping up with things. In this new environment, that communication is going to be much more difficult. And as a result, it has to be a lot more deliberate, much more intentional, much more active engagement from us as parents and our sons and daughters and our teachers. So I can say honestly, we don't know exactly what impact that's going to have on the homework that we need to have. And we'll continue that conversation so we can do the best job we can to strike that balance well.
And as a follow-up, someone asked about whether or not the teachers will have their weekly plans and assignments on their websites, or if those are only going to be posted to Google Classroom. And I'll answer that one. Google Classroom is going to be the primary tool used for all assignment deployment in Portage Public Schools. We received a lot of feedback from families this past spring with concerns about there being too many methods of getting assignments to students. And so to streamline that, we've asked all teachers to utilize Google Classroom as their primary assignment tool. That said, it's possible that teachers might post it in other places as well. But what has to be done is Google Classroom will be used to communicate with the students on a regular basis. That way it provides a routine for our students so that they know what to do, they know where to go, they know where to look to get the assignments that their teachers are giving to them each day. And as I showed you in the screenshot of the test classroom, it really is a tool that students are familiar with. They've been using it. Most students have been using it for years. And so that's another benefit of Google Classroom. But kind of piggybacking off of what Eric said, if you have questions about a particular teacher's classroom, the best thing to do would be to communicate with your child, your student here at PC, and to keep in contact with your child's teacher. They might have suggestions for you and tips for you. Same thing, I'll be posting that parent help website so that you can see that in the chat. It'll give you some strategies for how to do that. And then a parent asked, can I log in to my child's Google Classroom to see their assignments? And the answer is yes. If you choose to do that, you could give us a call to get their password, or you ask them for their password to give it over. We know that there are some privacy questions about that, and that's the relationship that you build with your student and whatever is comfortable between you and your child. But yes, if you were to call us, we would give you their password so that you could log into their Google Classroom if you want to see that for yourself. Can my senior leave campus for lunch?
Oh, that's an easy one. The answer is yes. Absolutely yes. Ooh, that was fun.
All right. And then what about freshman IDs? They don't have a Portage Central High School ID. So when are they going to get those?
Well, let's make it even harder, if I may. So we were on that first day of school going to do everything we talked about, right? Having kids come in the building, get their, make eye contact with their teachers, smile with their eyes, get their textbooks, do all that sort of stuff. And then they were going to leave the building and come around to the back part of the building into the commons and all get their school picture taken. Well, as you probably saw in that email, all school pictures for the entire district have been put on pause with the notion that we might do it sometime in the spring. But I think what we've learned from last spring, that when we pushed the pause button March 13th, and I think most of us thought we'd all be back to school, maybe spring breakish, that pause turned into a permanent stop. And we did not return to the school year, which was really, really difficult for all of us, obviously. I say that because school pictures might not happen this year. I think we need to recognize that, just given all the circumstances that we're all working through. And school pictures are one of the things we use for our student IDs. And we do that particularly because our freshmen tend not to like to have their middle school pictures on the school ID because they look like, yep, you guessed it, middle schoolers. So that's actually one thing we're going to have to figure out on our end, that what does a school ID look like? How do we access that? But also, where are all the other places that we use school pictures? And that's kind of personal level, because one of the places they usually get used is the school yearbook. And just so happens the yearbook advisors happens to be Ann Albertus, my wife. And she is freaking out about not, don't tell her I said that. She is anxious about what does that mean for a yearbook to not have school pictures. And maybe we'll have to do something really creative to get those school pictures of each of our sons and daughters. So that's another question. I have to beg your indulgence and say, stay tuned. That is definitely on our radar screen. We know it is. Even if I wanted to forget it, I'll be reminded every day when I get home. And so just know that that's something that's on that we're definitely thinking about, and we'll keep you in the loop as we figure out those plans as well. Oh, one other reminder too, just in case you entered late, don't forget we are recording this for any families who couldn't make it here tonight, and we're going to post it to our Portage Central High School YouTube channel. And two, we've been here for about an hour and a half, which is awesome because your questions are terrific, and it just makes me happy to talk to moms and dads because this is kind of one of the things I like about my job. Two, don't you stay as long as you like, and whenever you feel like you need to leave, you feel free. But know too that Tama and I and Emily are going to be here for as long as you have questions. So thanks for being here again. What are the questions we got?
Actually, Eric, that was the very last question that I see in our back channel. That said, if you do have more questions, like he said, we can hang out here. I'm just looking back through the chat to see if there were any I happened to miss, and I don't think so. I am attempting, so here's an example of trying to work and adapt on the fly. I'm trying to get my mail to load to get you the link to that parent help website. I will figure out a way to do it. And if it's not in the chat by the time we close, I will put it in the parent FAQ that we've started. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, and if I can emphasize too, if you haven't had a chance to read those frequently asked questions, they've been a huge help to us. To the videos too, our kids who worked on that did an amazing job to help us focus on what are the most important things to communicate in those videos. So if you know any of those kids like Lauren and Audrey, they are just amazing. So if you know them, tell them thanks for us because they really did a great work on that as well. Any other parting shots, questions, thoughts, ideas, concerns? I like that someone's logo is a Pokemon ball. That makes me really, really happy.
Yeah, at this time, our group is getting a little smaller. So if you have a question and you just want to pop it into the chat, that would be totally fine. We had to start off with a back channel like this. This is just one way that you might see your teacher working with your students in a virtual learning environment. Sometimes when you have a conversation going on and the chat is too full, it's really hard to follow along with that. So now that our group is smaller, if you want to pop a question in the chat or unmute yourself and ask, that would be cool too. Someone asked, what about students with IEPs?
Yes, that is a great question. So today, for example, I met with all of our special education teachers, and they were working on not only like what's that first week going to look like, and how are we going to support all of our students with IEPs, but also reaching out to all of our families to see what that looks like. I am really, really grateful for them. So whereas we talked about, I think we talked about the fact that for many of our students with IEPs, they definitely need some additional support, and they definitely need their teachers without question. So if you have not by the end of the week heard back from your special education teacher, your case manager, please let me know, because that means I dropped the ball somewhere, and so I will pick it back up again, touch base with that teacher, and make sure that communication is happening before this week is out, so we're ready for next week.
I did see a question that I missed in the chat, and I apologize. I think that person has already gone. But it was about new students. Are they going to have to declare that they're a new student when they arrive? There's a station for freshmen and new students. There will be a sign there, so they'll know where to go. And then another question, I think we answered this, but it's about Fridays, and are they expected to be online on Friday?
No, they're not expected to be online. There might be some really wonderful opportunities where, by them being online, they can interact with a particular teacher to make up assignments, tests, quizzes, that sort of stuff. But it won't be a requirement, generally speaking.
Someone in the back channel says they'd be willing to submit a picture to the school if we can't get school pictures taken. I think that's a creative idea.
Yeah, that's the things I've already heard about. A few of our kids have brought up that exact ideas too. I mean, we do kind of live in a selfie world. So is there a way we can do something creative like that? I think that would be a lot of fun.
Someone else has an idea. Maybe freshmen can send in their pictures and then we make the student IDs with those pictures and mail
Yeah,
them in. That's not a bad idea.
yeah,
I
because
didn't
our
think that would
freshmen,
work.
they hate it. They hate it when we use their middle school pictures. They just howl at us. So yes, I think that would be fun.
Will the student get a student ID and login account? When they enroll in Portage Public Schools, they'll be given PPS credentials once they sign up and get the network agreement signed, get their device. They'll be given that information when they enroll. So if they're already enrolled, and they're a returning student, they already have their network credentials. If they are a brand new student to Portage Public Schools, once you enroll, the information will be given to you on what to do and how to get that account set up. If you're having trouble and you think that that's already been sent to you, or maybe you deleted something, please reach out to us and we'll help you connect with the right people. Call us at 323-5200, if you have a question about whether or not where your student is in the process of getting their Chromebook. I don't see any other questions.
Any other thoughts or questions? Again, with a few of us who are here, again, we are so grateful. Thanks for helping me deal with my anxiety at the very beginning of this. Like I said, we're all first-year teachers, and it's going to take us a little while to get used to it. If we could have if you don't mind, with a few of us who are here, have a round of applause for Emily and Tama, because they're really the brains behind the operation. They did an awesome job. Thank you. We are so grateful for everything that you guys are doing. And please, this communication is important in normal circumstances. It is essential in these circumstances. We need to communicate better than ever as adults to make sure our sons and daughters get the support that they need. So if you have a thought, if you have a question, if you have an anxiety, don't hesitate. Just pick up the phone, call one of us. Call a teacher, call me or Tama, call Jason Frank, call your counselor, and we will do everything we can to keep things moving in the right direction. During difficult times, it reveals our characters, and we are going to do everything to show that we have the character that where we earn your trust. And this is a time where we're going to, without question, earn your trust. So thank you so much for being here, folks. We'll hang out for a few more minutes if you have any other thoughts or questions. But again, we're really grateful that you took the time to be with us tonight versus do a lot of other things that you could have done. So thanks so much, folks. Have a great night. Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Tama.
Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Eric. Applause for Eric Albertus, please.
Have a good night, all. That was fun. We have to do that again.
Yeah, I know. It went well, I think.
I was thrilled. Absolutely.
I had a good time.
Yep. Mm-hmm. You did a great job as a moderator. You kept those questions moving. And boy, some of those questions you answered, thank God you were here because I wouldn't have been able to answer them. So that was fun. Oh, I'm still recording. I have to figure out how to turn that
And
on.
there is a new question in the
There
chat.
is?
Yeah, and actually it's a great one. I'm really excited about this one because it's a difficult challenge, but it's been great to see Renee and Brian working with our band students. The question is, will band class be a Google Meet where they try to play online together, or what is that going to look like?
Yeah, if I could, I see that's Amber. Nice to see her. Nice to, I don't think we've actually met in person, but we've definitely communicated, Amber. That is actually, if I could, again, if I could back away from your question just for a second, there are a lot of schools that are making a thoughtful decision, I get it, to cancel certain programs, to cancel things like band, to cancel things like ceramics or certain art classes, to cancel things like foods classes. And I get it. I'm not in any way criticizing them because they asked themselves a reasonable question, like back in July, like, how can you possibly do this during this situation? We have deliberately and decidedly determined to not do that. That is to say, we decided to everything that we offer, we're going to continue to offer without exactly knowing how we're going to make this all work. And I have no doubt that we're going to make it work because of the colleagues, the creative colleagues and the kids we work with. So I think you're right, Amber. I think some of this is going to be on Google Meets where kids will be able to do individual practice work that they'll be able to record and send into a teacher to give them feedback. And I think we're going to try to figure out other ways for kids to get together, like marching band, for example. I mean, marching band has been a wonderful sign of life here, where kids are getting together in the evenings, and we know how to do it. The band parents are amazing in terms of keeping all of the pieces and parts moving along. And so our kids can have their relationships with each other and can practice their instruments. During the day, it's going to be much more difficult. And so those are things that we're going to have to figure out here in the days or weeks ahead. But I think you're right. I think the Google tools we have will definitely be useful. So thanks for asking that, Amber. Great question.
All right, we've got another question about seminars.
Yes.
Do they have to sign in and out of seminars? Because seminars are kind of like a independent work period. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, funny you say that. Jim Schaefer, who's one of our, he's our PE and Facts department chair. He's one of those department chairs who we met with right before this meeting. His committee has been working on that for the better part of about 3 weeks of what seminar looks like. And seminars can be a lot different than it is in the real circumstance. So in the real circumstance, the first 10 minutes of seminar is reading, and then kids get on to the homework. What we've learned, what we know now is what we've talked about is in this online world, communication is going to be more important than ever. And so that's one of the things that each of our seminar teachers are going to be doing is touching base with our kids at the start of every class and pushing our kids to give us some feedback about what things are going well and what areas aren't going well, so that we as seminar teachers can identify that and hook our teachers up, our students and teachers together so they can keep those conversations going. So actually he has the rough draft. I'm looking at it right now. They're going to be working on it a little bit more tomorrow morning, sending it out to all of our teachers to make sure we're all on the same page. So I think you'll see that seminar is something that's going to be as important as every class. Kids have to show up to seminar just like every other class. There's going to be expectations and grading expectations like every other class, but the focus is going to be on communication and success for those classes. And so it'll be a really helpful tool, I think, especially in this online environment. So that's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. Any other questions pop up while I was talking too much?
not in the chat, and we have answered all of our questions in the back channel. It looks like we have about 9 people remaining, so you are welcome to unmute your microphone if you have a question. If we don't hear anybody, we'll probably be closing out. It's possible that people may have stepped away, so
That's okay.
that's okay.
All right. Thank you
Thank
so much,
you.
folks. Have a great night.
Bye, Cheryl.
Hey, Cheryl.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.